The evolution of virtues, particularly the shift in how society interprets virtuous living, reveals a significant transformation in Christian thought over time. C.S. Lewis observed that historically, love was regarded as the highest virtue by many Christian thinkers. However, in more recent times, self-denial, relinquishing personal desires for the benefit of others, has increasingly come to be seen as the pinnacle of virtue. This shift, as Lewis noted, reflects a deeper change in moral focus that warrants exploration. Modern interpretations of self-denial often regard it as an end in itself, but Lewis argued it is meant to serve a higher purpose. Renunciation is not the ultimate goal, but a means to an even greater end, a life of devoted discipleship to Christ, leading to the joy and fulfillment that such a relationship promises. Self-denial in this context is not about deprivation for its own sake, but about clearing the way for a more profound spiritual joy. There are also potential dangers in elevating self-denial to the highest form of virtue. When too much focus is placed on the act of renunciation, it can foster a pessimistic worldview where suffering and deprivation are unnecessarily glorified. In such a perspective, the pursuit of happiness can be seen as sinful or selfish, distorting the true message of Christianity. The Christian life is meant to be one of joy and love, rooted in a relationship with God and others, not defined by a constant rejection of personal well-being. Modern philosophy may have influenced this altered perspective. Thinkers such as Immanuel Kant and the Stoics, who promoted the renunciation of personal desires, may have contributed to a shift away from traditional Christian teachings. These teachings have long emphasized the pursuit of happiness, not merely for oneself, but in a way that reflects goodness and love toward others. By neglecting this joyful pursuit, self-denial risks becoming a hollow and rigid practice, devoid of the love and fulfillment central to true virtue. Lewis contends that the actual problem lies not in desiring too much, but rather in desiring too little. We often find ourselves satisfied with fleeting pleasures, neglecting the boundless joy that God can bestow upon us. A particularly compelling excerpt from Lewis's The Weight of Glory encapsulates the very issue I aim to explore in this discussion. He suggests that if you were to ask 20 righteous individuals of our current time what they believe to be the supreme virtue, many would likely answer with self-denial. In stark contrast, if you had posed the same question to esteemed Christian figures of the past, their responses would nearly all center around love. This stark distinction indicates a significant shift. A once positive virtue has been overshadowed by a negative term. The implications of this transformation extend far beyond mere semantics, deeply impacting our spiritual journey and understanding of what it truly means to live a virtuous life. The concept of philology is deeply entwined with the idea of self-denial. This notion seemingly suggests that the focus should not be on enhancing the happiness of others. Rather, it implies that we should disregard that happiness altogether. The emphasis appears to be more on our own deprivation rather than the joy of those around us. However, I contend that this perspective diverges from the true Christian virtue of love. The New Testament speaks extensively about the idea of renunciation, yet it never promotes renunciation merely for its own sake. Instead, it teaches that we are to deny ourselves and take up our cross in pursuit of following Christ. Furthermore, nearly all the promises of reward following this act of self-denial appeal to our natural desire for happiness. In our modern society, there exists a pervasive belief that wishing for our own happiness, or actively anticipating enjoying it, is somehow inappropriate. This idea, I believe, can be traced back to thinkers like Kant or even the Stoics. However, it does not find its roots in the Christian faith. If we take a moment to contemplate the remarkable promises made in the Gospels, we realize that the rewards offered are not meant to be minimal. Rather, they reveal that our Lord perceives our longings as too insignificant. In many ways, we act like half-hearted beings, dabbling in trivial pursuits, such as indulgence in alcohol, fleeting pleasures, or overwhelming ambition, while the prospect of experiencing infinitely greater joys lies just beyond our reach. It is akin to a child engrossed in playing with mud pies in a rundown area, completely oblivious to the splendid adventure of a seaside holiday that awaits him. We are, sadly, far too easily satisfied. Understanding how virtues have evolved over time requires a closer look at the historical and philosophical backdrop that catalyzed this shift. C.S. Lewis sheds light on the essential disparity between the values held in ancient Christianity and those prevalent in modern thinking. Historically, the esteemed Christian thinkers regarded love as the highest virtue. However, contemporary ideologies have elevated self-denial, defined as the act of relinquishing personal desires for the sake of others, as the paramount virtue. What led to this transformation in viewpoint? Part of the answer can be traced to the philosophical influences that have shaped Western thought. Figures such as Immanuel Kant and the Stoics played pivotal roles in prioritizing renunciation and duty as foundational elements of morality. Kant, for instance, proposed that true morality resides in performing one's duty for its own sake, independent of any rewards or personal incentives. He argued that moral actions should be carried out without any consideration of personal gain, which in turn fostered the notion that virtue is rooted in the renunciation of individual desires. This evolving lens through which self-denial has been viewed reflects a complex interplay of historical thought and cultural attitudes towards morality, reminding us to look beyond mere self-denial and appreciate the deeper, joy-driven motives that lie at the heart of a virtuous life. The Stoics advocate for a mindset of detachment from both pleasures and emotions, viewing this as a crucial avenue toward achieving inner peace. In their philosophy, virtue lies in the calm acceptance of that which lies beyond our control, which includes letting go of desires and worldly indulgences. For them, living virtuously means moving away from personal wants in pursuit of an ideal state characterized by balance and self-discipline. When we take a closer look at these Stoic beliefs and contrast them with the Christian tradition, we can identify notable divergences. In Christianity, particularly as articulated by Jesus in the New Testament, the act of renouncing worldly desires is not an ultimate aim. Instead, it is presented as a vital step toward a richer, fuller existence by following Christ. Here, the emphasis shifts toward love, for God and for fellow human beings, where renunciation serves as a tool to facilitate this complete surrender to love. Christianity does not vilify the desire for happiness. Rather, it critiques the chase after narrow and shallow forms of happiness. Over time, the philosophical notions surrounding self-denial have intertwined with Christian doctrine. In many scenarios, these concepts appear to have eclipsed the foundational idea of love as the highest virtue. The modern perspective, which often hails self-sacrifice for the benefit of others as praiseworthy, may have deeper ties to the teachings of Kant and the Stoics than to the original messages imparted by Jesus. This variation in perspectives sheds light on why contemporary society frequently elevates self-denial as the ultimate virtue, while early Christians emphasized love. Such a realization prompts us to reflect on whether this shift in emphasis has brought us closer to understanding the true essence of Christianity or distanced us from it. Furthermore, to what extent have these philosophical influences shaped our interpretation of what it means to live a virtuous life? These inquiries set the stage for a more profound exploration in upcoming discussions, where we will delve into the implications of this modern viewpoint. We will also examine C.S. Lewis's proposals aimed at reinvigorating the concept of love alongside the quest for deeper happiness. When self-denial is perceived as the ultimate goal, various pitfalls can arise, steering individuals away from the genuine purpose of Christian living. This singular fixation on giving up personal joys can lead to an imbalanced outlook on virtue, wherein suffering and deprivation are needlessly glorified, and the quest for happiness is viewed with skepticism or outright disapproval. This perspective sharply contrasts with the biblical teachings, which recognize renunciation, but always in relation to a higher aim, namely, the pursuit of love and a strengthened relationship with God. In considering these philosophical dynamics, we can appreciate how they influence our modern interpretations of virtue and happiness, inviting us to seek a balance that honors both the gifts of joy and the call to love. Emphasizing only the aspect of renunciation can foster a mindset where the Christian experience is perceived mainly as a path filled with suffering and sacrifice, rather than as a journey of love and joy. This viewpoint can contribute to what many refer to as toxic asceticism, where the denial of any form of pleasure is mistakenly regarded as a noble virtue. Instead of actively and joyfully pursuing the well-being of others, this perspective often results in a harmful cycle of self-punishment, causing individuals to view their own happiness as something to shun. However, a different understanding of the Christian life emerges from the scriptures. In the book of John, chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus states, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." This powerful declaration suggests that Jesus' intention is to provide a life filled with richness and vitality, one that encompasses genuine joy through a relationship with Him. When we focus excessively on renunciation, we risk misinterpreting this message, transforming faith into something that feels confining rather than freeing. While the Bible acknowledges the significance of renunciation, it always does so in light of a larger purpose. In Matthew 16:24, Jesus invites His followers to reflect on their commitment. "If anyone wants to follow me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." This call to renunciation is not without clear intent. It involves relinquishing selfish desires to pursue a path of love and service. Here, renunciation becomes a means to deepen our connection with God and to serve others more fully. Moreover, in Hebrews 12:2, we find an illustration of how Jesus navigated the balance between sacrifice and joy. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before Him, He endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. This verse reminds us that Jesus saw the cross not merely as an act of renunciation, but as a step toward a greater joy that awaited Him afterward. This serves as a powerful reminder that Christian renunciation should always be fueled by a vision of something more profound, a joy and good that extends beyond the act of sacrifice itself. Another pitfall of an excessive focus on renunciation is the emergence of false humility or spiritual pride. Individuals may start to believe that merely renouncing comforts and pleasures elevates their virtue or holiness, leading to an unwarranted sense of moral superiority over others. Throughout His ministry, Jesus admonished such attitudes, particularly in Matthew 6:16-18, where He cautioned against those who fast merely to attract attention, suggesting that those individuals have already received their intended reward. This teaching encourages us to approach renunciation with a spirit of authenticity and purpose, rather than as a means of elevating one's status in the eyes of others. Ultimately, it is crucial to remember that Christian faith invites us to embrace a full, joyful life, grounded in love and meaningful service to others. It highlights the notion that genuine renunciation should be subtle, centered on God, and not driven by the need for human approval. This passage illustrates that renunciation must not be a means to impress others or to achieve a reputation for virtue. When our focus becomes solely about showcasing what we can forgo, we tend to overlook true humility. True humility is about serving others without a quest for acknowledgement or acclaim. Furthermore, if we concentrate solely on renunciation, we might entirely miss the fundamental purpose of Christianity: love. The Apostle Paul powerfully articulates the importance of love in 1 Corinthians 13:3, where he states, "If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames but do not have love, I gain nothing." This profound statement reveals that even the most extreme acts of renunciation are pointless if they are not driven by love. Paul emphasizes that God does not desire sacrifice for its own sake. Instead, He longs for our actions to stem from a genuine and heartfelt love for others. This teaching aligns with C.S. Lewis's critique of the notion that self-denial should be the ultimate goal guiding our actions. For our actions to genuinely exemplify Christian virtue, they need to be fueled by a love that prioritizes the well-being of others. When we love in this way, we not only serve others but also discover authentic and lasting joy for ourselves. At this juncture, it's beneficial to explore C.S. Lewis's perspective on the interplay between desire, happiness, and virtue. This view stands in stark contrast to contemporary beliefs that suggest the pursuit of happiness may hinder moral integrity. For Lewis, the issue is not that we crave too much. Rather, it is that we settle for too little. we frequently find ourselves satisfied with fleeting moments of joy and trivial pleasures, neglecting the promise of a far greater joy that God offers. This perspective encourages a reassessment of how happiness is understood within the context of Christian life. Lewis contends that the modern portrayal of self-denial often casts the desire for happiness in a suspicious light, as if merely wanting to be happy diverges from true virtue. However, he argues against this notion, indicating that the Bible and Jesus' teachings do not condemn the pursuit of joy. Instead, they affirm that the desire for happiness is an inherent part of human nature. Lewis critiques the idea that rejecting the longing for happiness leads us to pursue lesser pleasures. By doing so, we often overlook the boundless joy that God wishes to offer us. One of the most striking illustrations of this critique comes from his metaphor of a child who finds satisfaction playing with mud pies in a slum, entirely unaware of the extraordinary joy that awaits if they would only accept an invitation to a holiday by the sea. This image poignantly encapsulates the idea that we frequently confine ourselves to trivial experiences, missing out on the fullness of joy that God has in store for us. It's a reminder that our desires should not be suppressed, but instead redirected toward the divine happiness that transcends our limited perceptions and experiences. A vacation at the beach often symbolizes the simple pleasures in life, reflecting how many individuals, including Christians, tend to hold on to fleeting joys like success, material wealth, or even the satisfaction that comes from fulfilling their obligations. However, this focus on temporary comforts can distract one from pursuing a more profound and lasting happiness that comes from a relationship with God. C.S. Lewis posits that our cravings for fulfillment are not overly intense. In fact, he suggests they are too weak. He believes that the current societal notion of self-denial leads us to aim too low when we are capable of so much more. Something far greater is within our reach. Lewis's insights are deeply embedded in the biblical teachings, which view joy as a worthy pursuit for humanity. Numerous passages in the New Testament offer promises of enduring happiness for those who follow God's path. For instance, in Psalm 37:4, it is written, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." This verse implies that seeking joy is not inconsistent with faith. Rather, it can be appropriately channeled when centered on God. In the New Testament, Jesus also makes various promises of blessings for those who are willing to set aside their personal ambitions to follow Him. Crucially, these promises often include the notion of joy that awaits in the future. For example, in Matthew 5, verse 12, during his teachings on the Beatitudes, he explains, "Rejoice and be glad, for your reward in heaven is great." Here, Jesus does not reject the human desire for happiness. Instead, he redirects that aspiration towards something far more significant and eternal. This leads us to understand that true Christian renunciation involves not the rejection of longing itself, but rather the trade of fleeting pleasures for lasting joy. Lewis points out that Christianity does not promote a negative mindset that seeks to avoid happiness. Instead, it offers a vibrant vision of yearning for something more fulfilling. The notion of reward or recompense found throughout the Scriptures indeed highlights that God acknowledges and appreciates our desire for joy. Take Hebrews 11, verse 6, for instance, which states, "And without faith it is impossible to please God. For anyone who approaches Him must believe that He exists and that He rewards those who earnestly seek Him." This verse strongly suggests that hoping for a reward from God is not only valid but expected as a part of faith. For Lewis, this promise of joy fuels our motivation to lead lives filled with love and service to others. When Christian renunciation is seen in this light, it becomes clear that it is not about turning away from happiness. Instead, it is about pursuing the deeper, richer happiness that can only be found in a meaningful relationship with God. In essence, by embracing this depth of understanding, we can come to recognize that sacrificing lesser pleasures paves the way for exquisite joys that are everlasting and can transform our lives and those around us. Self-denial in the context of faith isn't the final destination. Rather, it serves as a crucial step towards opening our hearts to the joy that God has in store for us. C.S. Lewis presents a perspective on desire and happiness that contrasts with the contemporary notion that equates sacrifice and lack with virtue. For Lewis, the core challenge lies in understanding that God doesn't intend for us to settle for trivial, momentary pleasures. Instead, he encourages us to possess the courage to pursue genuine and profound joy, the kind of joy that he promises in the teachings of faith. This idea invites us to move past a narrow view of spirituality and to embrace the hopeful prospect of true joy. This perspective is especially pertinent in today's society, where there is often a tension between the celebration of immediate pleasures and the dismissal of the longing for spiritual happiness as overly simplistic or naive. Lewis's insights beckon us to delve deeper into Christian teachings surrounding desire and happiness, where letting go of certain things can guide us toward an unending joy. His critique prompts us to think critically about how we perceive the roles of desire and happiness in our lives. By acknowledging that the true issue lies not in desiring too much, but rather in settling for too little, we can better align our spiritual journeys. The Christian experience should not be solely characterized by self-denial. It should also be filled with hopeful anticipation for the joy God promises to us. This vision inspires us to transcend a spirituality rooted in empty sacrifices and to actively pursue a life infused with genuine love. In this framework, renunciation becomes merely a stepping stone towards deeper and more fulfilling happiness in God's presence. With this outlook, we can arrive at a more nuanced understanding of virtue. Here, the desire for joy is not viewed as an impediment, but as a pathway leading us to a richer understanding of a life motivated by the love and generosity that God teaches. Ultimately, C.S. Lewis encourages us to view Christianity as a journey that does not merely focus on renunciation, but leads us toward authentic love and deeper joy. He reminds us that the intention behind giving up certain pleasures isn't to punish ourselves, but to create space for something far greater, a life that showcases God's goodness and finds fulfillment in doing good deeds. Lewis's invitation urges us not to settle for a meager existence, but to pursue a life filled with transformative love that positively impacts both ourselves and those around us. The quest for true joy is not a distraction from the Christian faith. Rather, it is its essence, a fundamental aspect of living a life enriched by divine love and purpose. This pursuit encourages us to continuously strive for a happiness that transcends the superficial and leads to a more profound connection with God and with one another. As part of the promise made by Jesus, he came to bring us life, and not just life in a basic sense, but life in all its fullness and richness. Ultimately, we realize that our innate longing for happiness can align beautifully with the concept of genuine love. This understanding encourages us to live not just on the surface, but to fully embrace both the aspects of renunciation and the profound joy it can bring us. When we practice renunciation, we are not merely denying ourselves pleasure, but rather we are opening our hearts to a greater sense of purpose. This purposeful existence leads us to experience the true happiness that God desires for each of us. It is in aligning our lives with these teachings that we become more adept at loving others and living a life that truly mirrors the core values of Christianity. Moreover, the journey toward this abundant life involves a deliberate choice to seek deeper connections with both God and our community. Engaging in acts of kindness, showing empathy, and practicing forgiveness are pathways that enhance our spiritual journey. By striving for a life that reflects these values, we not only fulfill our own desire for happiness, but also contribute positively to the world around us. In this way, we actively participate in the promise of an abundant life, transforming our everyday experiences into expressions of love and faith.